Now, we talk about the Congress's actions against the Chinese government. They are not the only country. Other countries like Australia, the UK, Canada have announced diplomatic boycotts of the 2022 Winter Olympic Games in Beijing, as the United States has, over CCP's human rights abuses. In addition, within the last week, as I mentioned in the last conversation, the international community declared the Chinese treatment of the Uyghur Muslims to be a genocide. But not everyone is concerned with China. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has announced his plans to attend the Olympics. In addition, Putin had a virtual meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, during which Xi Jinping told Putin that the relationship between Russia and China, quote, exceeds an alliance. Joining me now to talk about what this means for the U.S. and for the world is China expert Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. He can be found on Twitter at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, welcome back to the program.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
So tell us a bit about this meeting that Putin and Xi Jinping have had.
This was a virtual meeting today, and it comes after President Biden had virtual meetings with Xi Jinping and Putin. And so the Chinese and the Russians are now conspiring. The important thing here, Joseph, is that these two countries are now supporting each other's aggression. Putin said that he supported China's claim to Taiwan, and Beijing said, at least according to the Russian Foreign Ministry, that they supported Russia's position that Ukraine should never be a part of NATO. So they're working closely with each other. And this is a problem because we now got these two large states that are arrayed against us.
That does seem like a problem. Do you think that indicates either or both of them potentially planning moves on these disputed borders?
Well, I think it does. But in any event, if one of them does move, we can expect the other to move against its victims. They don't even have to act in coordination. They can just take advantage of the situation. And it's not just China and Russia. These two large states have proxies: North Korea, Pakistan, Iran, Algeria. And once one of these countries moves, all the rest of them could go at the same time, which means we could have simultaneous conflicts at both ends of the Eurasian landmass, as well as across the rim of Africa.
What do you think we should read into the fact that Xi Jinping, Putin, and Biden all had a meeting together, and then almost immediately Jinping and Putin got together and said, we're going to have our own meeting? Is there something to be read into that?
I think what it shows is that Moscow and Beijing are coordinating. You know, both Putin and Xi Jinping had their meetings with Biden, and now they're starting to figure out what their path forward is. And this is going to be bad because when these two conspire, nothing good can occur.
Do you think this is about anything other than getting back territory that they believe is theirs?
Well, it's certainly that. And remember, China believes it has a right to rule the world and the near parts of the solar system. So we're talking about the most ambitious rulers in history. And I know that sounds ludicrous, but this is China's ambition, to rule Tianxia, or all under heaven, which means that we have now got a fundamental challenge. This is not just competition between China and the United States, as many people say, and as Biden says. This really is China trying to take down the existing international order and replacing it with worldwide rule from Beijing.
Do you think the White House sees it that way also?
No, they don't. Biden has all along had a benign view of China. When he was running for president, he said, oh, you know, the Chinese are not competition for us. Remember that "come on, man" comment? But also as president, Biden has been talking about China as a competitor. He won't use the term adversary, and he won't use the term that China uses against us, which is enemy, which means that we don't have a president who understands the nature of the Chinese challenge and therefore is not taking those measures that are necessary to protect the American Republic.
Explain a little bit why you think that is. Why is it that China will use that term against us, but we're reluctant to use it against them? Is this a worldview difference? Is this a fact that we feel it's going to escalate the situation if we use hostile language? Where are they coming from?
That's a great question. And because I think that their policy is so afactual, it's hard for me to answer it. We know, for instance, that a lot of people believe that the United States should try to integrate China into the international system. That was decades-old policy. So I think Biden is susceptible to that. Also, Biden is subject to pressure from Wall Street, from Walmart, corporate boards that are very much in China's camp. And, he's got a son called Hunter, who's got some pretty interesting financial arrangements with Chinese entities. You put all this stuff together and it shows, I think, that Biden, for whatever reason, I'm not in his head, but for whatever reason, Biden doesn't understand where we are with China and what China is willing to do. China's tactics are extremely malicious. We have 802,000 dead Americans, dead from a disease that China deliberately spread beyond its borders. We have about 60,000 Americans killed each year from fentanyl, and China is behind this illicit fentanyl gangs. This is a regime that is willing to murder Americans, and we do not have a president, and we've never had a president, who has understood how malicious the Chinese can actually be.
You talk about the fact that the White House is subject to pressure, and of course, every White House is because they operate in a political environment. We've also been talking about the pressure that the international community is attempting to exert on China. Diplomatic boycotts of the Olympics, which my gut tells me is mostly symbolic. The Congress's recent action to pass legislation to cut off the supply of goods from certain parts of China to the United States. Do you also think that China is subject to pressure? And if so, what are their pressure points?
Their pressure points is that they're heading into a debt crisis, which I don't think that they can get out of. We know this because, for instance, of Evergrande, the large property developer, has something like $310 billion in obligations. And it's not the only property developer that's in trouble. When we start to think about the amount of debt in the Chinese system, we don't really know what it is, but it could very well be 400% of gross domestic product, which is an unbearable burden for them. I actually, when you look at their economy, which is stagnating, they can't produce the output which is necessary to retire their obligations. They got a debt crisis they can't solve. That's a pressure point.
Now, Gordon, explain this to me, because I feel like I often hear that we are borrowing all the money that we take on in debt from China. Is everybody just underwater in debt?
Well, everybody is underwater in debt. After 2008, we had the United States and we had a number of countries try to overstimulate themselves. China's in trouble because it adopted that tactic, and it adopted that tactic with greater determination than we did. But yes, we've got too much debt, and we got a Congress right now that is willing to spend well beyond its ability to raise revenue. But I don't think that China is holding of American debt for various technical reasons. Because of the way the global financial markets operate, it doesn't really give them any leverage. They talk about using their debt as a leverage against us, and they don't do it. They've been doing this since 2008, talking about it. They never do it because they know it doesn't work. It's pretty technical, but I can, when you look at the way the markets work, Beijing doesn't have a tool there.
Gordon Chang, that's why we bring you on. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you so much, and for the great work that you and Tony do. So thank you.
I appreciate that. We appreciate you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.